Hello, I'm Heather Lockett, and this is Lasting Conversations. We have an owl with us today. We are in the studio with Mo, and Mo has her beautiful human handler, Amy Kight, joining us today. Hi, Amy.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
Amy and I just saw each other this morning at Busch Wildlife Sanctuary in Jupiter, Florida, and Amy is the executive director up there, and it just is kismet and synchronicity to say, are you available today? And there was a giant yes. And can I bring an animal? So to be honest, I said, but not a snake, because human does have to focus a little bit, and that was not going to work. And you said, well, how about alligator? How about an owl?
I hear that quite often.
You're right. How about an owl? Because the animals that you care for up there are extraordinary. And let's go ahead and start there. You have a personal story in terms of the animals have been loving you and vice versa since you were a little girl. And that has morphed into now you've been with this wildlife sanctuary in Jupiter for 18 years, which looking at you, that you still must have been a little girl
I'll take it. Thank you.
Do that. So tell us what you do, what the sanctuary is all about, and tell us about Mo.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Busch Wildlife Sanctuary, we actually started in 1983. So we're on our 40th anniversary now. And originally it was a wildlife hospital. And it was a place where people could bring sick, injured, orphaned, wild animals. We focus on those that are native here to Florida or that migrate through Florida naturally, and get them help, get them back on their feet again, and then get them back out in the wild. And as things progressed, what we recognized was about 90% of the patients coming in were affected by humans. Mm-hmm. They were hit by cars, tangled in fishing line, kept illegally as pets, all sorts of things. And it got very evident very quickly that the hospital portion was really kind of a Band-Aid for a bigger problem, which was education. Mm-hmm. People need to learn about the wildlife that we share our environment with, hopefully how to coexist with it, and really, if they feel so compelled, which I hope they do, be good stewards of our environment and not only learn about it and coexist, but try to help it as well. And that's where our mission became twofold: wildlife hospital and environmental education and conservation. Mo came to us a few years ago. Mm-hmm. Mo is a barred owl, not to be confused with a barn owl. And this type of owl, you're going to find a lot of times in wetland areas. And Mo was hit by a car. And actually, the car who hit him just kept going. But thankfully, the car behind was a woman named Monique, who happens to run Harmony Animal Hospital up in Jupiter, which is a hospital that we partner with and that help us out a lot with our wildlife. Yep. And she picked up the owl, brought him to us, and that's how he became Mo. He's named after Monique. Yep. And Mo, unfortunately, suffered such a traumatic head injury and eye injury that eye needed to be removed. Mm-hmm. It was no longer functional, and it was causing a lot of pain. So with that, no longer being able to go back in the wild with only one eye, decided to turn Mo into one of our animal ambassadors, and been working with us ever since, and really has turned out to be just an amazing spokesperson for not only just owls, but I think wildlife in general.
Well, I'm just staring at this beautiful, beautiful animal and the claws and everything, and I really just want to pet and pet and pet. It's so cute. And the children that come, you work with a lot of schools, so talk about education, and the families come in, and that is a lot of times the first and only time that kids are introduced to the animal world, especially the more cityfied and in suburbia. So what a beautiful experience to have these animals available and to learn that way. For me as a kid, I did grow up in pretty rural areas, either out in the desert of Tucson, Arizona, or in the woods of Massachusetts. But to me, it was the books that were the book, the Thornton Burgess, and even the Brer Rabbits and Brer Foxes, all the little Beatrix Potters, all the stories that had all the children's animals. And they became my friends, and they became my education into the animal kingdom. So that's really fabulous that you have families and you have the education and the schools for the kids. So go ahead and tell us more about that. Where I know there's one more piece to that, which is when you're talking about volunteers and how people help, it really hit me that you have some little ones that can come in to be these volunteer helpers. So I want to hear a lot more.
You got it. So we get about 220,000 visitors that come to the sanctuary every year.
Wow.
And that has doubled in the past 4 years for us.
Wow.
So that to me is just a wonderful sign that people are, especially during COVID, I feel like a lot of people reconnected with nature. People finally had a chance because they were homebound to go outside,
right,
to look around their own yard and see what's out there. And that really was something awesome for us to see. So we're open 6 days a week and we don't charge an admission fee. We survive on donations. And that goal is just for anybody and everybody that wants to come and wants to spend some time in nature and wants to be around these animals, they have that opportunity. When it comes to the schools, we have schools that come on field trips. We have scout groups that come, camp groups that come, different kind of volunteering groups at the high schools and of course, adults as well, homeowners associations and such. So there's no limit on the age. But you mentioned, some of the kids, they don't have that opportunity to see these animals.
Right.
And one of my very favorite stories was I had a group of children from a very urban area. These were kids that are a lower income bracket. And I think oftentimes are just wondering, what are we having for dinner tonight? They're not really in touch with or thinking much about the environment that they live in because everything around them is concrete and streets and struggle a lot of the time, unfortunately, in this specific area. And those were some of my favorite groups when I was the education director still, because everything they saw was like mind blowing. And I remember we were actually looking at the birds of prey on exhibit and a bald eagle flew over, which we have a nesting pair on the property at the sanctuary. So for us, it's normal, but it is still cool to see them. And I went, look up, and I'm pointing and I'm looking up and I'm telling them how to identify the tail feathers and the beak. And all of a sudden I look and all these little ones had hit the ground. They were all ducking down and they were telling me to put it back in the cage. They didn't understand.
This is wild.
That's where it belongs. It doesn't belong in the cage. They're only in the cage because, people have hurt them. This is where you find them. And I was like, you guys, you got to get up, and it was so eye-opening and it stuck with me for so many years because it was sad. But then I was happy that there is a place they can go and learn that, which was obviously something that they weren't able to get in their home environment. And I just, that story just always makes me happy, that we got them over understanding that they don't belong in the cages. Regarding our volunteers, the entire time I've been at Busch Wildlife, our, I'm using air quotes, adult program is 15 years and up. And when I started coming, there was on Saturdays, we would have our junior naturalists, which was our 9 to 14-year-old volunteers. And there'd be a morning session and an afternoon session. And over the past 18 years, as homeschooling and alternative methods of schooling have become more popular,
right,
we have had to add junior naturalists, not only just on Saturdays for the kids that are traditionally schooled, but we have Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays because the popularity of the program warranted adding weekday programs for those kids who have non-traditional schooling. And we would also started to notice is the 9 to 14-year-olds would be getting dropped off and the parents would bring the little siblings and the little ones would be sobbing. I want to stay. And to them, of course, trying to explain when you turn 9 is like trying to explain when the year 2138 comes around, they think that's forever away.
Right.
And so we started offering for our little 5 to 8-year-olds. And so they come in, they don't come in as regularly, but they come in and it's a lot of arts and crafts. We bring the animals out, have them draw them, have them identify, is it nocturnal, diurnal, whatever it might be. And it's funny because now we've been doing it for so long that they come for 5 for 8. Then they go to 9 to 14. Then at 15, they turn into volunteers. And I even have some, like Miss Taylor, who you saw this morning, the second she turned 18, she was 18 years in one day and she was on the payroll because she had just grown up in the program. And she can do a program with these animals just as well as anybody I've ever known at 18 years old because she's been with us, her whole childhood.
This is so sweet. It's really, really sweet. And you mentioned about the education and all the different opportunities. So here you blossomed within the COVID time. And how was that affected? It's an outdoor space for the most part. Were you allowed to stay open for a little bit or how did that actually go? How did it go?
Like everybody, it was a hard time. And it's funny because pre-COVID, I had always said, if I can just have like 2 weeks to catch up.
Well, there you go.
You know what I mean? But unfortunately, it didn't quite work out that way.
Right.
But we were closed for almost a full 2 months, from right around St. Patrick's Day into May.
Which is relatively short comparatively.
Well,
yeah.
We kind of got our rear end handed to us though, because we reopened, as things were starting to open up, especially being in outdoor spaces we were. We made everything one direction. We put up, social distancing signage. We added more hand sanitizing stations. Masks were mandatory, things of that nature. And we were open, and a few days went by and I got a phone call from the state of Florida, and they were like, you can't be open. You're an amusement park.
Oh.
And I'm like, when did we become an amusement park? You know what I mean? Like, we don't have rides, we don't have food, like we're a nature
It's
center.
not a petting zoo. It's not even any of that.
No, but at that time, everyone was in panic mode.
Correct.
And nobody knew how to handle anything.
Well, not to mention, you have to tell people the animals are okay. We're not messing with anybody here.
Well, and we were taking animals the whole time. We never stopped taking patients.
Never stopped being a hospital.
We just stopped having the people coming, to the property to see the animals. And so I was like, no problem. So we shut back down. And of course, the rumor that went out is that we had, rampant COVID running through. And it was like, no, it wasn't, but whatever. Every social media is its own beast. So we closed back down, waiting for our inspection as an amusement park to reopen. And the gentleman came. And right off the bat, very obviously overworked, overwhelmed, so much going on. And he's like, show me your rides. I don't have any rides.
Poor guy.
Okay, concession stands. I don't have a concession stand. Why am I here?
I don't know, dude. Come enjoy the animals.
He walked around for about 10 minutes and he's like, this is so stupid. Just go ahead and open. I was like, thank you. So it was, but you can't get
everybody
upset
had to
about
do
that.
it. No, you can't.
You can't. Everybody's doing the best that they can.
Yep.
I'm glad they came.
Yep.
I'm glad they approved us.
Yep.
You move on with it. And, and I do think that a lot of people really took that time to really reconnect with nature. And that's wonderful. And I love it. And it's fantastic. And, so if Busch Wildlife can offer that to them, let's do it.
Right. Maybe he needed that day to take a walk and be with the animals and the trees.
Find his center.
Find the center. And it's a sanctuary. So there you go. Within that time frame too, I know you guys are in a giant capital campaign, mostly because the land that you are leasing is getting utilized in a different way. And so you're making the move to a whole different piece of land. Luckily, it's just up the road. Did that all kind of culminate in and around the same time frame?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have been in a wonderful partnership with the Loxahatchee River Environmental Control District. And they are a special agency of the state. And their goal is to protect and preserve the Loxahatchee River, which was Florida's first federally designated wild and scenic river. It's a big undertaking. And a big part of that is they took all the homes that were along the river and got them onto a sewer system so that the septic fields weren't leaching out into the river.
Okay.
And so we had this great partnership because part of their mission is, of course, conservation, environmental stewardship. They had property back in the mid-90s they weren't utilizing, and they let us start renting it. So we've been there since the mid-90s. And around 2019, we were in lease negotiations, and this area is continuing to grow.
Yes.
Their operations needed to grow. Busch Wildlife has doubled since 2017 as far as the amount of people coming to us. And we just weren't able to come to a balance where everybody's long-term goals could be met.
Right.
And so that was in 2019. Early 2020, you got the pandemic coming. By November of 2020, we had bought our new property. And now you're trying to not only run a nonprofit during a global pandemic, but try to build a new one before your lease expires.
That's a little busy.
A little bit. Thankfully, the Loxahatchee River District has been wonderful. We've been able to get a couple extensions because they recognize pandemic, supply chain issues, inflation, and the cost of everything. Our latest renewal that we were able to get a 6-month extension, which will take us into September of 2023. A lot of that hinged on Hurricane Ian.
Oh, right.
Because what happened was, thankfully here on the East Coast of Florida, we weren't terribly impacted where we are, but the West Coast obviously had horrific
Did you take in some of their animals from other places?
We were in communication with other facilities. They didn't need us to take animals, but they did need help getting supplies. So we sent supplies over to the other side of the state. But with our construction of the new facility, all of FPL's conduit, panels, everything was going to the west coast of Florida. Those were all things that we need for the construction of the new sanctuary.
Right.
So I'm so grateful that it went to the West Coast, but it definitely put us a few more months behind our projected move date. So things like that have happened. So hopefully August 2023, we'll be moving into our new space and then getting it open to the public and getting everybody back coming to see the animals.
Now, is it going to be similar with the different buildings that you have all the different programs? Or some of the areas are tapping into, well, let's make it an event center also, and let's have parties and let's make it even bigger and bigger. Are you guys doing that or keeping simple?
Yes and no.
Right.
So the new property is 19.4 acres. We're currently only built on 6. So we're basically
really the whole place is only 6.
It's only on 6.
As you meander through the pathways and everything, it feels like it could be a lot more than just the 6 acres.
And thank you for saying that, because that's always something we wanted to do, you know. The new property though, because of the amount, we get about a 10% increase in wildlife every year. Mm-hmm. So we're up to almost 6,000 patients a year.
Wow.
So a full 5 acres will be designated towards wildlife rehabilitation. The hospital is quadruple the size of our current one. We'll have more outdoor rehab space for our patients, which is something that we've just been lacking for a number of years now. And that will be offsite to the public. That's strictly just for the purpose of getting these animals healthy and getting them back out in the wild again. Then there's roughly 10 acres, which is going to be that educational space where our ambassadors live and people can walk around and meander the trails and get to view them. The goal has been to obviously make larger habitats, more natural habitats.
Because you do have a couple of bears that have had to live there.
Yeah, we've got bears and panther and otters and bobcats and all sorts of fun. He's like, he's going to fall asleep here. Most eyes are slowly closing, like you're boring.
That's better than the pooping on the carpet.
Well, that's why I'm kind of holding him over the table. It's easier to clean the table.
There you go. But he's just so sweet. He's just so sweet.
And then we'll have 5 acres that we're leaving natural.
Okay.
So hopefully at some point we've got natural wetlands on the property, native trees on the property that we'll be able to build kind of a boardwalk around for people to go and adventure on that.
Well, and that area is a lot more countrified. So you'll have
more
the
rural.
Natural bobcats and
absolutely.
coyote, and you'll have a lot more nature showing up too, saying, hey, where's the party?
But with everything growing, that exponentially, we do need to find other revenue sources, so that's where things like a larger amphitheater space, more indoor space where we could not only host our own events, but also to be able to offer the space to the community to use for a fee. I envision this big, beautiful kind of open pasture area, for lack of a better term, with beautiful live oak trees that you could decorate with, twinkle lights and lanterns for, say, a wedding venue or something. So we do have to do things that we historically haven't done a lot of, just because the cost of running such a large facility is going to be an ever-present cloud, and then also trying to find other partnerships. There's Master Falconer that's in the area that's looking for a partnership, so that people can actually come and hold these birds of prey and fly them and learn about, their importance in our ecosystem. I'm looking for a beekeeper because I don't think that people understand how important bees are, and bringing that in as another aspect. Anything that can teach conservation and appreciation, and attract visitors to get them in there. I think once you get there, I'm biased, you're going to fall in love. Right. You're going to want to help. I don't know how you can look at these guys unless you just got a real stone cold heart and go, I don't really care. Because our survival depends on the survival of our environment, and every one of these creatures plays that aspect in it.
It's really, really true. So what do you think they would have to say? We actually saw her this morning. Sarah Palmer was my guest last week, and the title of that show ended up being Sentient Calling. And so much of her passion has to do with it. These are sentient beings who have feelings, and they know, they're very wise. They have wisdom that we are learning from them. Heck, we know how to fly airplanes because people have observed how the birds actually can do that ergonomically and with the science of all that. So it all blends together, having our human selves living together with the animal kingdom. And there's a beautiful conjunction with that. And again, I'm looking at this amazing animal with his eye out. What do you think he would say? And I'm one more thing with this. You were talking today about Fraser crane.
Yes.
You have this beautiful crane. And when you said what animal to bring, I'm like, oh, let's bring Fraser, who's already been on TV and on airplanes. This is adorable. But these animals do have a story.
Yes.
They have a story. And that was part of your wish, as a matter of fact, is how to get these stories out that are relatable to children and to families, whether they are a movie or a children's book. Tell us more about Fraser Crane and even Mo and how their stories, or what is it that they would say to all of us, really?
Well, I think in a case like Mo, I don't believe that person, tried to hit Mo. I think that's just an accident.
I think most of it always is an accident.
A lot of it.
I'm going to interject too. I was thinking before we got together, the times that I ever saw my grandmother cry, my grandmother Pauline, was when an animal had passed away. One of her doggies had drowned, or that she had hit a squirrel. She lost her mind. She loved animals. She just lost her mind. And so I think that, yes, there have been, most of us is all accident.
A lot of it.
A manatee with a boat or this or that. It happens. It's very sorrowful. And again, the animals kind of in their own way, they know that. I hope it's not fun, or they certainly know when there's another being, a human being there to help them. We've seen the footage of the whales that are helping the people in the water unrope them. I find those fascinating.
It's so funny you say that. And I know this is a family show, so I'm going to keep it clean, I promise. Yep. But our veterinarian that we work with, I think Mo's a little bit different. But once the animal becomes an ambassador of ours, we work very closely with them to make sure that if we are going to bring them into an educational environment, that at least from the best that we can tell, they seem relaxed.
Right. They're going to be okay.
Upset. I mean, if you notice Mo's like half eyes open, ready to fall asleep, so it's a different level that we go with our ambassadors.
Right.
And I really do think that they get to a point where they have a comfort level with us because he's not trying to run away. He's falling asleep, know. When you're talking about our patients, it's totally different.
Of course.
Because of
course
they
need to heal.
We do not want them to think that people are their friends. We want them to continue to, I'm sorry to say it, be scared of us, know, because when we release them back out into the wild, we don't want them going up to people thinking like, you're cool. I need food. I need help. I need shelter, whatever it might be. So we really want to limit our ability to be around them. Even when you get babies in, we have masks that we wear so they don't see humans feeding them. We have like an owl mask that we put on, and we'll put on a ghillie suit and then an owl mask so that they're getting food from the best owl mom that we can make, because we don't want them getting to that point. Like some of the animals that live at the sanctuary who've been too habituated to humans, too imprinted by humans, they wouldn't successfully return to the wild. So we kind of have a joke, our vet and I, whenever we've gone out, we've done a few public releases, like to recognize the opening of a new natural area or returning an eagle to its mate at a certain nesting location, something like that. And, you'll have 15, 20 people there and you'll release the animal. And everybody goes, oh my gosh, like, look, he looked back and he thanked you. And we always joke, no, he probably looked back and flicked us off, honestly, because in his world, those were those horrible people. They kept me in a box, basically, in an enclosure. They manipulated my wing and it hurt and, so they don't often, which is perfect. That's what we want. But I do think they sometimes fly away and they're like, oh, thank goodness they're out of my life. Like, they were just driving me crazy,
This is amazing that you're saying that because it's a different perspective. So, but to your point, when someone asked this morning, how can we help? The first thing you said is don't feed them.
Yeah.
If people have animals in their backyard or at a park, don't feed them.
Yeah.
And expand a little bit more on that.
Well, the biggest thing is you want wildlife to be fearful of people. You really do. Respectful, great. But once an animal, Fraser's a great example, becomes reliant on humans, it's not necessarily that they lose their ability to survive in the wild, but it makes living in the wild much more difficult. Fraser's example, Fraser, I don't want to take up the entire time talking about it. I'm sorry I couldn't bring her. It takes two people to move her crate around.
A sandhill crane.
Big sandhill crane.
Yeah.
But Fraser was a youngster, was living in a very conservation-minded community, which is fantastic.
Right.
Fraser's parents were hit and killed by a car, leaving Fraser orphaned.
Oh, wow.
And the community had such a bleeding heart for Fraser. And I totally understand. What they probably should have done is call Busch Wildlife, let us come out and get her, finish raising her as a wild crane, and then be able to return her to the wild. Instead, they started feeding her. And Fraser kind of became the neighborhood pet, for lack of a better word.
Okay.
And Fraser became so dependent on these kind people that when some wild cranes came into the area, they recognized she was not behaving like a wild crane should, and they beat her up.
The cranes did.
The cranes did it.
Oh my gosh.
So, and they basically, they broke her beak. They had basically, scalped her almost, and she was out unconscious. Then they brought her to us. We were obviously able to save her, but the conversation had to be had that this bird is probably going to experience this throughout her life because she doesn't associate with cranes. She, in some ways, might not even think she's a crane because she's been around humans and that's who cared for her. And she's lost that natural fear of humans, but also wasn't taught by her parents totally how to be a crane. And that the decision was made that Fraser would become a permanent resident at Busch Wildlife. And because of her experience, that's where she's got all her frequent flyer miles, is she's gone and done a lot of education. Letterman, Leno, Today Show, Good Morning America, and sometimes you get a little flack for participating in these programming. Mm-hmm. But the way that I look at it is if you have someone who already cares about nature and who cares about the environment, who cares about wildlife, they are going to seek out those opportunities to learn more and to invest more into it. That's the I hate to say low-hanging fruit, but essentially that's the low-hanging fruit of our society for caring about wildlife. I need to reach those people who don't look out for those things. They're not watching what's around them. They're not already doing it. And so doing something that's more entertainment based, but gets you in front of a different audience, and they see a Fraser, they see a Mo, and they go, man, that's so cool. What's that place called?
Right.
I wonder if there's a place like that around here. We should go. It's those converts, that you turn on to it. And that's really what's remarkable to see. Those kids that are in those very urban environments that do a field trip, and then hopefully they go home and they tell their family, dude, I went to this cool place. You got to go check it out. There's eagles flying around wild,
Right.
Those are the ones that getting to them is difficult, and you got to be a little creative to catch their attention.
Well, that's really fun. And we had part of the perception that I even had my own mind go, oh, hadn't thought of it that way, is growing up with The Wonderful World of Disney. And again, all the different little books that become humanized, and Mr. Fox says this, and there's this otter, and that it feels like there's a relationship between human and animal. And I think in many ways there are, but I'm also hearing your point. We have to let them be wild animals and not automatically domesticated. And of course, people think that they can domesticate any kind of animal. Do you have, I don't want to open up a can of worms. Let's just say, I don't know. There seems to be like there could be a line between what is meant to be a wild animal and what is meant to be in somebody's home in the middle of suburbia.
Absolutely. During my career, in wildlife rehab, there's been a lot of animals that have come to us. And
do you have owners or even neighbors that say, oh my gosh, here, I didn't realize and I can't handle this?
Yes, you do. It's interesting though, because I have been around for a long time, and I feel like there was a time period when people just didn't know, I found this baby fox. I didn't know there was anywhere to take it. Did you really research it, or were you just really excited you had a baby fox, but they keep it until it's becoming an adult. It starts exhibiting adult behaviors, whether that is reaching sexual maturity, marking its territory, just becomes frustrated because it doesn't have enough ways to exude its energy, whatever it might be. And that's when they want to bring it to us, because now it's a problem.
Right.
And it's like, well, I didn't know, it's like, okay, and sometimes I think there's a genuine good intent that was there. Right. And other times I think they're blowing smoke up my rear. But I will say, as social media, at least this is my interpretation and my experience, as social media has grown, and you have some people, and it's usually there's this wonderful fox that's on a lot of social media, and she's adorable, and she is someone's pet in England. And I don't know what the laws are there. I'm assuming it's all good or whatever, but she's an exceptional fox that habituated herself to living in a home. That is not your standard fox by any stretch of the imagination, but people see it. I want a fox. No, And also on social media, we all know everybody puts the glossiest image and the best foot forward. It isn't this great because we want everybody to think that that's what our life is like. And then people go out and get these foxes and they go, this is not the fox I saw on Instagram. Why doesn't it act like, well, you're not seeing when that fox ate the pillow cushion off the $1,000 couch or, peed on your good china or whatever it might be, So it's been very interesting to watch kind of the evolution, if you will, of people trying to keep wildlife as pets. And I mean, I can name a number of them right off the top of my head. We've got multiple foxes because of that. And you can see it go in waves too, where it's just like dog breeds, when 101 Dalmatians came out, everybody got a Dalmatian. And then all of these Dalmatians ended up in shelters. You see it with wildlife as well. Somebody will see a movie about burrowing owls that was out a number of years ago. I want a burrowing owl. No, you don't. No, you don't. All they do is live underground and scream at you. I mean, no, no.
And your history, so you've been at Busch for 18 years, but your animal husbandry, if you will, has been even a lot longer than that. So you come with a wealth of knowledge and background and come from and picking up
knowledge or just experience,
picking up the pieces.
I hope there's some knowledge in there, but I don't, I hope your audience can understand this. I feel very, very lucky that from a very young age, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. According to my parents, first I wanted to make the French fries at McDonald's so I could eat as many as I wanted.
Yep.
But then after that, it was always animals. That's all I wanted to do. And so I have a hard time sometimes personally relating when people are like, I just don't know what I want to do with my life. Huh? I mean, my husband makes fun of me all the time because he's, he just turned 40 and he's like, I'm still not sure what I want to do when I grow up. And he's like, and you've been doing it since you were 6. And
it's a gift. It really is a gift to know from a young age.
It is. And I don't think that I always recognize that, I just was like, well, obviously you just pick what you want, you do it, and that's something that I admire about myself now as I get older,
right.
But I've always wanted to do it. I was lucky enough that we had a veterinarian who was a family friend that let me come in when I was 6 years old. This is the 80s. It would never happen now, and I could come every Saturday and volunteer. And I stayed there until I was 22 years old. That point, a lot of the animals that I had grown up with and in my eyes were part of my family even, I knew them, they saw me, they knew me, they loved me, I loved them, were passing away, because they're old. It happens, these animals don't live as long as us. So it was normal, but I was coming home crying all the time. And I'm like, I'm in college. I should be out having a good time, partying, not crying every day. And so I left that vet's office and I started working in the bar industry and having a great time, but I missed the animals. And so I started volunteering again at a wildlife hospital and it's never stopped.
And here you are.
And here I am.
And this is a really beautiful area that there's a lot going on between the sea turtles or the water conservation. There's different groups that are doing very similar things. So that's always fun and helpful. And for those of us who live here and raise children here, or even as a tourist, it's amazing to have different places that people can go and learn and have the animals be taken care of. Like the guide this morning with he was very sad face. He had a bird in a box. Where do I help this animal? Yeah. Something happened to a little tiny bird, but there's a place to go to help out. I want to circle back really quick because I'm team future. I'm team human animals, how we're having some fun things. And that shift of education, when you mentioned about the schools who are still participating, and some schools lose their funding and they can't do field trips as often as they could, or even have people come in, but to have this programs like yourself available for any schools and the home schools and the little pod schools. One thing that is interesting to me when you're talking about the teenagers, are they able to then get maybe a certification that it then can blend into early education on at college level or certification levels so that they can then fly within their own education and vocation and their careers?
I don't know that there's any real like certification or registry for something like that per se. definitely they get hours for community service, hours for school.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because I've been doing it long enough now. Like one of my first youth volunteers when I first started the sanctuary, now he's in his 30s and he's going to school to be an environmental lawyer, and to watch that. And he still goes with me every year. We take about 20 animals to Charleston, South Carolina for a week to do the big wildlife expo up there. We're one of the headlining acts, if you will. And he still comes with me every year. And this is a kid who was 12 when we started.
Nice.
It's like, oh my gosh, I'm getting so old. So we do have those, I've written a number of recommendation letters, not only for colleges, for veterinary schools, for kids who have decided they want to learn how to be falconers or wildlife rehabilitators. So there's kind of avenues that their experience does help them, that way. But I don't have any necessarily certifications that are involved. The other thing, and it does get sad with the schools that don't have proper funding. We've had a number of grants too that have offered us the opportunity to offer some scholarships to like Title I schools and to certain groups. And I'm really proud of, not on a school level, but just an educational level, we do offer about 600 free programs a year to the community.
Beautiful.
So Monday through Friday at 3, Saturdays at 11 and 2:30, we have our wildlife encounters. And that's 52 weeks a year for, well, I can only speak for 18 years, but 18 years now. We've also added Spanish programming, sign language programming. I'm looking for a grant for Creole programming. So even if it isn't always offered in the schools, I'm very proud that we're able to offer it on a community level and a family level, and people can just come. You can come every day if you want. We've had folks who live in the neighborhood across the street who literally come every single day. And they get to the point where I'm like, do you want to do the show? Because you could do it as well as I could right now. You probably have even gone home and researched facts that I don't even know about these animals.
That is so cute. And how beautiful. And you have some picnic tables and benches, and it's a beautiful spot. And I look forward to when the big move happens. It's going to just grow exponentially.
It is.
And the work is going to grow.
It is.
Do you have one more little tidbit that you'd like to share?
Well, I mean, this, like you said, it kind of seemed just like perfect stars aligning moment that I was able to come over here today and do this podcast. But we do have our own podcast that we've done.
Cool.
It's just, we have one season that's out, very family friendly, which was really talking about how a wildlife sanctuary deals with COVID and closing down. And kind of the very end segued into what's going to be our move to the new property. So we're currently recording season 2. It's called Inside Busch Wildlife Sanctuary, and it's on all the hosting sites. So I greatly appreciate you letting me kind of put that word out there. And yeah, that'll pretty much go into all the in-depths of, everyone wants to know how you're going to move the animals. And we've already started training them for whether it be sedation injections or going into kennels. My biggest worry is once we get them moved, settling them in.
Right.
Everything smells different, sounds different, looks different animals in the area. That's going to be,
that's what I was wondering
the
this
owl
morning.
is just sitting here falling asleep, and it just makes me feel like, shut up, Amy, like stop talking, because the owl is going to sleep on you. Like,
is he getting heavier and heavier?
No, I've got my hand kind of propped up on the table. So, and he only weighs a little over a pound. So he's pretty much all feathers anyway.
Really?
Yeah, they're all feathers. So he's not heavy at all.
Oh,
it's just
goodness.
so funny to me when like you're talking, and I feel like he's part of, our small audience right now, and he's falling asleep. So I'm just going to stop.
He's just chilling and zoning. But he is a majestic bird. This is not a small bird. So I thought you were going to say 8 to 10 pounds.
No, that's the eagle.
God.
Believe it or not, the eagle
Really?
is just over 8 pounds, So that's why when, there's so many things, be careful. There's an owl. It's going to run off with your child. I'm like, is your kid a pound? And why is it out in the yard alone if it only weighs a pound? I mean, it really is. There's so many misconceptions out there about what wildlife will do or are capable of doing. So that's what a lot of our education focuses on, is we don't need to get in the nitty gritty. You don't need to know the anatomy of an owl or anything, but just the kind of basic common sense and the cool things that make you go, I want to help protect these guys, and I want them in my yard and I want them around.
I have a question. I've raised my hand. Ooh. The notion that owls are wise, like all the animals have a little tagline. So the wisdom of an owl. Tell us whether that is a misnomer or completely true. Because they look, when this animal is looking at me, even with his one eye, he's looking right through me.
Yeah.
He knows some stuff. But is there something in particular that owls have this thing about wisdom.
I don't know that that's true. I hate to say that.
Right.
Only because, I feel like that's those Beatrix Potter books.
Right.
Or the Winnie the Pooh
Owl.
book, the Wise Old Owl.
Right.
When in actuality, sorry, Mo, but it's the truth, their eyes take up more room in their skull than their brain does.
Really?
So that's where you get the term bird brain. You're like, oh, what a bird brain. It's kind of that small brain.
Yeah, but he's looking, saying, yeah, keep trying.
He's rolling his eye at me.
Yeah, that's right. So we're very, very wise.
It's funny. I tend to find a lot of wildlife that supposedly have this, whether it be wise or strong or confident. When they're taken
sly,
out
like
of
the
their
sly fox, or cunning.
But when you take them out of their natural environment, and unfortunately we're bringing them into something that's very different for them and very foreign to them, you don't always see those traits. They're kind of blown up in our brain, and I'm horrible at saying anthropomorphize these animals to have these traits, and what, like, one of the biggest things that really upsets me, and I try so hard to educate people, when you find an injured wild animal, oftentimes it's fight or flight mode. But sometimes if they're so sick, they'll just kind of sit, and it's this almost giving up that they've done. Bunnies are a great example. A lot of times people's dogs or cats will catch baby bunnies, and the person brings it in and they're holding it in their hand and they're just stroking it. And they're like, look, he's so sweet. He's so calm. He's just, and I'm like, he thinks you're going to eat him. It's like, that's not a sweet, what we're equating as like a dog or a cat that would sit in your lap and be pet as being sweet is them going, if I sit still, maybe this giant isn't going to eat me. Maybe they won't hurt me. I'm just going to sit here, And so it's something where, we have made this idea in our head that these animals are going to like this, but it's really more comforting for us to think that they like it than it really is for the animal that's there, and we get that all the time. Someone will, there's a hit by a car possum and it has a broken jaw, but I fed it. Okay. If you just got hit by a car, do you want me to take you out to dinner or take you to the hospital, especially if my jaw is hanging off? Right. It surprises me sometimes where I'm like, I don't understand quite where, just stop, take a breath, common sense, for some reason people
call
think that
911.
They don't have a pain, and they're like, look at this wing, it's on backwards. And I'm like, that hurts, like, let's break your arm and let me swing it around at you, like, what do you, it's very interesting, and those are those moments that it's not going to be on a stage and it's not going to be on a microphone. Right. It's when they walk in the front door of the hospital for us to say, okay, stop 1 second, put the animal down and just have an honest conversation about, thank you so much for rescuing it. However, handling it is scary. Feeding it is problematic. Do carrots grow in Florida? No. Why are you going to give a wild rabbit carrots? They don't even know what a carrot is. They've never seen a carrot in their life, Yeah,
but Beatrix Potter says
exactly,
you have to have a carrot for the bunny.
It's so funny sometimes, right. When you talk to people and the myths, I guess you could say, or the misconceptions. And it is fun, if you can have that conversation to dispel that and to, teach them something that is a different perspective oftentimes than they had in their mind.
That is actually good medicine. Very good medicine right there. Oh, we have a youngster looking in the window and seeing this owl. Yes, we have an owl. This is so fun. Is there any such thing as a 911 for animals? Or if not yet, maybe someone needs to go ahead and start that.
We have a 24-hour hotline for Busch Wildlife Sanctuary, for us specifically.
Right.
Yeah. So the staff members rotate the phone around. We take care of the phone. And a lot of times it's just talking you through, how do you get the animal, put it in a safe place and bring it to us in the morning? Because we aren't able to be open 24/7, 365 days. A lot of people do call 911. And it's really funny because you'll get someone who calls 911. 911 will say, this isn't an emergency. You need to call animal control.
Right.
And at least here locally, our animal control deals with domestic animals and livestock. They don't do wildlife. So they hang up with 911, they call animal control. Animal control has a voice recording that picks up and says, if you're calling about wildlife, call Busch Wildlife. It gives our number. Then they hang up phone, they call our number. If it's after hours, we're closed, call the hotline phone. So often by the time that people get to the hotline for us, they are agitated.
Right.
And the first thing is, finally a person.
Right.
And it's like, whoa.
Right.
I answered the phone. Can you be nice to me for a second? I haven't, so it's always an interesting conversation to have, or they just rattle off an address and they think you're going to send an ambulance and a task force out. It's like, we don't have that kind of resources.
Well, that you're saying that, you never know. Somebody out there in the hinterlands might say, oh, maybe we need to do that.
That would be incredible.
Because think of all of the animal kingdom, and that the humans do want to help in some fashion. Mm-hmm. And if there's a one-stop phone number, 911's taken, but maybe that could be something that would be very helpful at some juncture.
Oh, it would be incredible
to then coordinate the local resources to be able to help somebody.
Even for us, majority of our animals come in, like the gentleman you saw this morning, because we don't have a paid ambulance service.
Right.
The public brings them to us,
right.
And that's always fun too. When someone calls, I found a pelican. Okay, bring it over. What?
Right.
You want me to, I'm like, it weighs 2 pounds. It doesn't have teeth, doesn't have claws. You've got this. And we just talk them through it, and I don't think there's anything better too than when they finally show up, and it's usually a mess. They've been pooped on. The pelican obviously is upset,
in distress.
But when they've done it and it's like, you did that, they're so excited and they're so proud of themselves. And it's really pretty cool. We try to, plot them up as best we can, and sometimes sign them up to be a volunteer. If they're willing to do it, why not? Hey, we can use your help.
Amy Kight, this has been pretty cool.
This has been awesome. Thank you so much.
So exciting. And everybody, thank you for listening. Please be sure to like, follow, review, and share this podcast. And if you'd like to be part of the conversation, send emails to podcasts@lastingconversations.com and follow us on Facebook. This is Lasting Conversations. We get to the heart of everything.